Hello there, you awakening wonders. Thanks for joining me on Stay Free with Russell Brand. At the moment, we're on YouTube, but that will only be for the first 15 minutes before we are exclusively on the home of free speech, Rumble. And of course, our free speech is the free speech to unify in the spirit of love, not free speech to speak hatefully of one another. Of course, the reason we're so excited today is because we are being joined for a world exclusive. We have Tucker Carlson with us in studio, his first interview since leaving Fox News. Thanks for joining us, Tucker Carlson.
Russell Brand. As your friend and as someone who watches a lot of your videos, I'm amazed that I'm here. This is prettier even. I'm not going to give away critical details and jeopardize your safety, but this is, if people could see where you're broadcasting from.
Do you think it's a beautiful...
I think it's beautiful. And that's not an overstatement. I think it's beautiful.
Thank you so much, because I think we have a beautiful intention here. We're recognizing that independent media and independent politics are beginning to coalesce. It's becoming increasingly unlikely that you can report truthfully, honestly, and in good faith, putting forward anti-establishment narratives without being attacked. Of course, we're going to talk about a lot of subjects here, but and primarily we're going to want to talk about the reasons for you leaving Fox. We're going to want to talk about some of the reporting around Jan 6. We're going to want to talk about the attacks that you endured in your defense of the text messages around Trump. First of all, I want to start off, since you left Fox, how have you been personally, and how does it compare to the time when you left MSNBC in terms of its emotional impact on you?
Well, I've been fired. It's not the first time I've been fired. And I think in our business, when you work for a big company in media and, you say what you think, there's an expectation that you could get fired. So I've always had that. And I've always tried to take the long view, not just on media, but on life. All graves go unvisited in the end. I always think that. And so I was surprised. I didn't, expect to get fired that morning at all in April. So I was shocked, but I wasn't really shocked. And I wasn't mad. It's not my company. And when you work for someone else, that person reserves the right, and in fact has inherently the right to decide whether you work there or not. And I don't know why I was fired. I really don't. I'm not angry about it. You can believe me or not, but I think you can feel that I'm not. And, I wish Fox well. There was, ugly leaking, I'm a racist or whatever they leaked, or someone there leaked to the New York Times, but that's not true. And I think the people who run the company know that's not true. I actually don't think they did it. And I'm not mad about it. And I've been happy. I guess the only thing that bothers me is I'm 54. And when you get a little bit older, and my wife and I, our children are grown and we live in rural settings, as you do, because we believe in nature and God and dogs, you can lose your drive. I mean, it's just a little bit too nice, kind of. And I do feel like we, people who are healthy and aware and who can read, have an obligation to be engaged in the life of the community they live in, and the life of the country they live in, and the life of the world, to the extent that they can. And so my only fear has been maybe being a little bit too happy. I've spent a lot of time trout fishing, a lot of time, we have 4 dogs, a lot of time with my dogs and my wife, and a lot of kind of late breakfast outside and stuff. And, that's not, that's great, but life has got to be more than that. So now I'm back to work, and I'm grateful to be doing that.
The fact that you're broadcasting now on Twitter suggests that you still want to remain engaged in the international conversation, which is a conversation about ethics. It's a conversation about power. If you're watching us on Rumble right now, remember to press the red button if you want to join us on Locals. That's where I watch the conversation. I can see Sensitive Hearts, Ashella, all of our beautiful, unified, diverse community that speak openly and freely there. Please do join us, because at the end of this conversation, Tucker's going to join us for an additional chat. True or false with Tucker? In a sense, the whole conversation is true or false. I mean, what's the point in having a conversation if there isn't some line between authenticity and falsehood? You touched briefly for a moment on the idea of racism, and of course this is an idea that's talked about a lot, or an accusation really that's been offered. When I went on your show in America, mate, which I enormously enjoyed, and the personal connection with you that we have since cultivated is the thing that I perhaps most enjoyed. I spoke to some of my friends that are overtly liberal liberal, even though many of them are beginning to recognize that the categories of left and right are shifting. What they said is that Tucker Carlson, when he talks about demographic shifts in the United States of America, how the balance between different ethnicities is shifting over time, that is codified racism. And some of them, like some of my mates that are LA Democrats, like, you know, me, I don't believe in any political party anymore,
Right.
in this country.
Tell
or
me
your
about
country.
it. Yeah, no, I agree.
But I do still feel that some of the principles that are more typically associated with the left, like recognizing that all voices have a value in the conversation, and that essentially that racism is bad. So how do you feel about that? And what are you talking about when you say there's a demographic shift? You know, what do you mean?
Say a couple things. First, I always try. I'm over 50, so like, why wouldn't I just say exactly what I think at all times? And I do. And so if I had, well, whatever my racial views are, I would just say them. And I'm just saying them now. So my views about race begin with my religious faith, which is not very sophisticated, but is sincere.
Yeah.
And that begins with the belief, the knowledge, the certainty that God created people, that they're not objects, they're not machines, they're not widgets in a bin waiting to be assembled by some company. They are distinct individuals with distinct souls, and they have equal value in the eyes of God. Doesn't mean they have equal ability. Doesn't mean they all look the same, but it means they have equal inherent value. And my politics flow from that belief.
Yes.
And so the idea that you would reduce people to their race and say, you know, we're going to treat this person better or worse because of his skin color is repugnant to me. And it's something that I've argued against every day that I was at Fox News, I think all of my life. You can't punish or reward people based on their immutable characteristics.
Yes.
Because they didn't choose those characteristics. So it's inherently unfair. It's inherently immoral. I'm totally opposed to it. And so if that's a racist position, I guess, you know, I'll just stand and take the punishment. I don't think that is. I think that's an argument against racism. I think it's wrong to reduce people to qualities they were born with and they can't control. Period.
Yes.
My views on immigration are super simple and I think mainstream and sensible. The fact of who lives in a country more than any other fact determines what the country is like. And so if you change it radically over a very short period of time, you're going to have a lot of social upheaval, a lot of churn. It's going to rattle people. People can't metabolize change very well at all. The Industrial Revolution led to Stalinism and then the Third Reich. Like, these are basic facts. It's not an attack on anyone's color at all. And I'm, you know, whatever. But I would say, so those are my views. I support a lot of, well, I don't know how I feel about immigration as a topic. There are a lot of immigrants I love, including my best friend, for whatever it's worth. So I'm not against immigrants. Like, that's insane. But the way that the United States is doing immigration is designed to wreck the country and to make it unstable and to destroy any social cohesion whatsoever, or social trust, to make people hate each other and add to racial division, which I hate because it's not solvable. In contrast to, say, class division. If we're arguing about class, well, at least class theoretically can change. I can ascend or descend classes, but race doesn't change because we're not responsible for it. We're created that way. So you don't want racial conflict. That's the one thing you don't want. And I feel that in the United States, our leaders not only want racial conflict, but are stoking it. But as a practical matter, just in the context of U.S. politics, and perhaps it's similar in the UK, the term racist or white supremacist or white nationalist, these are terms designed to stop people from talking. I remember the first time I was called a white supremacist. And for whatever it's worth, I don't want to sound offensive, but I grew up in Southern California in the 70s. Living with a father who was, in modern terms, very racially progressive or something. He was always saying, God created people. Like, racism didn't even make sense to me. That was not a factor in my life at all. And we lived right next to Mexico. whatever. So, but the first time I was called a white supremacist, I was like, geez, it hurt. It stung. And I thought, I'm not exactly sure what that is, but I know that I'm not one, but I know that that's like the worst thing you can be. That's like calling someone a Nazi, like, or a monster, or Satan, or like, what is that? And I was bothered by it. It was right when I started my last Fox show. So it was in the fall of 2016. And I did a kind of long, very sincere, I mean it too, sincere script about how, you know, this is what I believe, and we're all created by God, and you should never punish or reward people based on their skin color. And it had no effect at all. And then I realized the people using those terms are not sincere at all. There's no sincerity. The words have no meaning to them, except as they're useful as tools to acquire political power and to make anyone who stands in the way of that shut up or go away or go to prison. And so once I realized they weren't sincere, then it's like, that's between me and God. And not only am I not a racist, I'm not much of a hater. Yeah. I really try not to be. And there are things that I hate, and there are people I feel like I'm on the verge of hating sometimes, or I feel myself obsessing. You know, you're like in the truck, or you're, you know, walking the dogs and you're pissed about something, and I can't believe that fucking person, you know, whatever. And I really try and catch myself and say to myself, that will eat you if you let it fester like that. Don't be that way. I'm a very flawed person, but I really try not to be a hater, because I think that's death. I mean it too.
One of the areas of your answer there that I imagine we could talk about further are the distinctions between having a position on immigration and its potential ability to destabilize an indigenous population, how you, again, cross-reference that with colonial and imperial history, how you cross-reference that with globalism and an attempt to create sort of like a centralist authoritarian model. You know, that's something we could talk about a lot longer, I'm sure, the distinction between racism and having a position on immigration. Also,
you get in the way of their business plan and they call you a racist. That's what's actually happening here.
And perhaps I wonder too, Tucker, indeed, about these new categories of misinformation, malinformation, and disinformation, how new ways of censoring and shutting down conversation are beginning to appear. I reckon we should come off YouTube now. If you're watching us on YouTube, the next question I'm going to ask you, Tucker, there's a viewer question. This is from @TheBoss. This is on Locals. If you want to watch us on Locals, press the red button and join our Locals community. This is how we aim to have conversations like this all the time, because my belief is actually an optimistic and hopeful one of humanity, that we share more with one another than divides us, and that there are ways of reorganizing society radically, and that our categories and our lexicon has to alter significantly, because left and right are starting to become redundant when there are so many similarities between the left and right, when both appear to be driving towards centralist authoritarian models where you are surveilled and censored at will, where free conversation is closed down on the basis that there is some other authority that knows better than you what you mean when you're speaking, and that they have the right to shut you down. Press that red button and join us over on Local, so you can ask questions to Tucker. I'm assuming that your question's for Tucker, although I'll answer any question that you throw my way, let me tell you. @TheBoss says, what is your relationship with Trump like now? But before Tucker tells us what his relationship with Donald Trump is like right now, having said once, like, you know, those text messages, remember that stuff? Yeah. And then publicly saying that Donald Trump is significant. Plus, we've got to talk about RFK. Plus, we've got to talk about censorship. Plus, we've got to talk about the military-industrial complex. Plus, we've got to talk about the Hunter Biden laptop. And plus, we've got to talk about Big Pharma. And in order to do that, we have to have free speech. That's why you got to click on the link in the description. Join us over on Rumble right now. And if you're with us on Rumble, bye-bye YouTube. We love you, you 6.4 million awakening wonders. If you're watching us on... Tucker Carlson says that RFK is more of a threat to the mainstream media establishment than Donald Trump. So, with RFK getting support from both sides of the aisle, is Tucker Carlson right? Could RFK be the man to bring down the establishment? Should I just ask him?
How hard is it to imitate Russell Brand? Beyond imitation. I never in my life thought that I, a longtime viewer, would be addressing 6.4 million awakening wonders and bringing them on a journey to truth and freedom. But that is indeed about to happen. Stay tuned.
I'm so grateful to you
I love
for coming
this.
here. Do you like
You
it?
get
You
it?
happy?
I love it.
Have you got everything you need? Can I offer you any
got
more
my-
snacks, nicotine,
I've
gum?
got my nicotine. I've got my Pellegrino. I had my coffee. I'm in my happy place.
I'm so glad that you're comfortable here. Thank you so much. It means a lot that you've given us
I
this
love it.
interview. Thank you very much, Tucker. Mate, so I suppose what we're asking there is that it seems that you said that Trump was no longer relevant in the political conversation. He was no longer the lightning rod. He was no longer the berserker of American politics. Loads of people on our platform absolutely love Donald Trump. They see him as the solution to America's problems. They see him as the great swamp drainer. It seems you have occupied varying positions on Trump at various times. Where are you on Donald Trump now? And particularly perhaps how that relates to the emergence of radical anti-establishment figures within the Democrat Party, notably RFK.
Where am I on Trump now? Well, I love Trump. Personally, I mean, I made a huge mistake last November in getting involved in American politics, something I've never done before, and making calls, this guy's going to win. I think this is going to happen in this state. Meet your new governor in New York, stuff like that. And I was wrong on almost every call. I'm not a very astute political analyst. I'm not interested in politics. I never have been interested in politics. I'm interested in ideas. I'm interested in people. And so there's a primary going on in the United States between Trump and a bunch of other people, primarily Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, but others, Vivek Ramaswamy, for example. And I haven't said word one about it. Don't plan to. I think looking back on this 10 years from now, assuming we're still around, I think we're going to see Trump's emergence as the most significant thing to happen in American politics in 100 years, because he reoriented the Republican Party against the wishes of Republican leaders. But when I think about Trump right now, so it's July of 2023, I'm struck by his foreign policy views. Trump is the only person with stature in the Republican Party, really, who's saying, wait a second, why are we supporting an endless war in Ukraine? And that, leaving aside whether Trump's going to get the nomination or get elected president or would be a good president, I can't even assess that. All I can say at this point is I'm so grateful that he has that position. He's right. And everyone in Washington's wrong. Everyone. And Trump is right on that question. And it's a big question. That war is reshaping the world. It's reshaping the economy of the world. It's reshaping populations. I was just in Romania last week, which is, of course, shares a border with Ukraine. The refugees in that region, the number of people killed in that war, Europe will never be the same because of this war. And it really matters. And Trump alone among popular figures in both parties understands that, and I'm grateful for it. Whether he gets the nomination or gets elected, words really matter. Saying something true out loud matters. And he is saying true things about Ukraine, and God bless him. That's how I feel.
So Trump generated, I suppose, a new type of populism. He rebooted politics. He reordered the Republican Party. And but perhaps, is it fair to say that, other than the significant fact that he was less militaristic significantly than other comparable presidents, at least recent presidents, I mean by that, do you think that he delivered in office? Why do you think he remains so fascinating? Do you think that the Americans, broadly speaking, that are attracted to Donald Trump are attracted by his foreign policy stance, or do you think that there's something else? And do you not think that RFK, who is my understanding, he's been on the show a couple of times, he's now on Rumble, and I find him to be a very admirable man. He similarly is vehemently anti-war, anti this conflict, and seems to also have identified the unspoken intention to be the deracination and annihilation of Russia for globalist and economic reasons, rather than the rather naive assumption that it's in any way a humanitarian conflict.
It's for democracy. That's my favorite. It's for democracy. Okay. Say the people who hate democracy. Well, I love Bobby Kennedy, and I've had him on my show many times. He announced for president on my show, which took a lot of stones on his part, given how despised I am by a lot of Democratic primary voters. I think he's a wonderful person. I'll say that. Just as a man, I admire him. He said the greatest thing any politician or any public figure's ever said to me at dinner a couple of years ago. They've gone after his family, The pharma companies and their agents in the media have really gone after his family, his siblings. They convinced a bunch of his siblings to denounce his views. So painful. And I'm so close to my family, I can't even imagine that. And I said to him, what's that like? I thought I took a lot of shit. I can't even imagine what that would be like. If my brother denounced me, I'd probably shoot myself. I couldn't handle it.
Also, if it was Buck, he would be able to provide the weapon.
He would. Yeah. Well, yeah. My brother's not going to denounce me. It's my best friend and wonderful man. But anyway, so I said to him, what's that like? And he said, and I'm quoting, I probably shouldn't be quoting a private conversation, but he said this to me. He said, I've got 7 children and they all love me. I don't care.
Wow.
And I thought, okay, you want to distill my values into a sentence? That's the sentence. So I really admire him. I don't agree with him on everything. I do agree with him, I'll just be honest, on most things, on the big things.
Yeah.
And so, no, I love what he's doing. I love his bravery, which is just remarkable. The amount that man has suffered for what he thinks is true, the amount of money he's lost, the friends he's lost. He's been ostracized in a way most people can't even understand because he ticked off a drug company. Really? And he's persevered, and I really admire him.
If RFK and Trump have risen, as they plainly have, to capture the popular imagination, and yet both to a degree are stymied, shackled, or reluctantly tolerated by their party, what does that tell us about the shifting sands of American political life? I think the area where you and I most plainly and overtly align, perhaps other than the belief in God, I suppose, is our deep understanding that the military-industrial complex and big pharma are able to exert significant power over the Democratic Party, a democratic process that renders ordinary electoral politics basically meaningless.
Yes.
These two figures are like populist anti-establishment figures in a sense. What do you feel is the likelihood of either of them being able to pass through the internal mechanics of their parties, in the case of RFK, through the legal hurdles that are being placed in front of Trump at the moment? And what is the role of independent media, in particular, say, a figure like Elon Musk, who seems, at the moment at least, to have the power to fight on that terrain? I know there was a lot in that question, Tucker, but you've got
I would say a couple things. One, the United States has had precisely in 250 years almost one populist president, and that was Teddy Roosevelt, also the most popular president in American history, who was president from 1901. President was who he served as VP was shot to death until 1908. Most popular president the United States ever had, and he was a populist. The two biggest populist figures in the moment are Trump and Bobby Jr., and then we had a guy called Ross Perot run about 30 years ago who roughly had the same politics. All 4 of those figures had one thing in common. They were all from the world they criticized. So you think of populist, the English peasant revolt, yes, which is one of the most interesting things ever to happen, where they stormed the Tower of London and they killed the Archbishop.
I'm from there. That started in Essex.
Yes.
Wat Tyler.
Yeah, Wat Tyler, exactly. We're not even sure if that was his real name. And
Wat Tyler.
And, but he was a legit peasant. Like, we don't even know when he was born. And that was not an effective rebellion. Of course, they did not free the serfs after that, as I recall. But the effective populists are the ones who critique from the inside and say, I grew up in this world. Teddy Roosevelt grew up rich, of course, in New York. Trump, Perot, Bobby Kennedy's family is one of the most famous families in the world in modern history, the Kennedys, and certainly the most famous family in democratic politics. So these are people who know how the system works because they've benefited from the system. And so their critique is much more meaningful and much more effective, I would say, because they can bear witness to what they have seen. I don't think Trump has changed politics in Washington. I think the parties both have been very resistant to any kind of reform. And that's very foolish. That's a Ceausescu move. You see things changing around you and you can't metabolize it. You can't sort of change with the moment. And then you meet a bad end when you become that rigid. I think that Bobby Kennedy and Trump will both have a very tough time getting the nomination. I'm hoping that both of them will, of course, I guess. I'm hoping that their message will be heard. I don't know. I don't even know what I hope for in the process itself, but I want them to be heard. And they can now be heard because there are channels of information that people can tune into and listen. I mean, I would amend one thing you said when you said that, these huge multinationals control our politics. Well, they also control our media.
Yeah. They
do. I mean, pharma, as you well know and often say on your show, is the biggest advertiser on American television. Probably true in the UK as well. And so, there's no incentive whatsoever to question their products. And now we have, because of the social media companies, Twitter and Rumble, and probably others, we have less filtered sources of information with fewer gatekeepers and a higher probability you'll hear something true. I think that's a huge change. I mean, how can you... I mean, this is like samizdat. This is like, information that the people in charge don't want you to see. And now you can see it. It really is the promise of the internet finally fulfilled. That's my hope anyway.
Amazine Outdoors is a skull-hanging company based out of Michigan. We use locally sourced steel to CNC plasma cut and fabricate all of our products. Our motto is simple, effective, and affordable. There are no fancy names or over-engineered designs. The hangers are built around the skull itself to allow you to securely hang your skull anywhere you please. They are priced with hunters in mind so you don't have to spend big money to hang your big bucks. AmazineOutdoors.com